Hello, my name is Christina Addy-Updegrow. I work here at Glenair, and I wanted to share a story with you. This is called Lucy's Legacy. I was new to Dallas, Texas, far from my childhood home and family in Wisconsin. By day, I worked as an activity director in a nursing home. By night, I was a lonely woman in a strange city where friendships weren't formed easily. I found myself at a local humane society, and it took only a minute to find what I was looking for. She was a small-sized dog covered in long, fluffy white fur. I was sure this ball of fluff was for me. She had other ideas. I was totally ignored by this small white dog, all the while being pestered by this shaggy, scraggly little black thing. "How long has this critter been here?" I asked. "Over 2 months," the woman who helped me replied. "She will have to be put down tonight to make space for more adoptable dogs." My heart went out for the black puppy licking my face. Maybe it was her affectionate personality, or the way she danced in circles on her hind legs, or the take me home look in her big black eyes. Maybe it was my lonely spirit needing to give her life instead of death. I didn't know. I didn't give it any thought. I just adopted her and drove home. Once there, she looked right at home. She sat on the rug by the back door as if it had been put there for her exclusive use. I called the little black dog Lucy and bathed the dirt out of her matted fur. I brushed the clipped until the knots came out. What had once been a shaggy, unkept pooch at the pound now had shiny fluff and curls for a coat. She ran circles around me as I laughed and thanked God for my new friend. I got approval from the nursing home administrator to bring Lucy to work. She was a lively pup, but warm and affectionate as well. She started on a test run for 2 weeks to see how she would do with the patients, but from the first day at the home, she fit in perfectly. Those 2 weeks turned into 2 years. Lucy and I would make my morning rounds visiting residents. She brought life into the home and friendships to those who lived there. Many times she'd take off on her own, and I'd find her on someone's lap listening to whatever that person had to share. One time, she would be curled up at the foot of someone else's bed. She offered comfort to everyone who was willing to have a bit of her company. She offered friendship to those who were lonely and love to those who would accept it. As for those who didn't accept it on the spot, she waited patiently, winning them over in the end. One male stroke victim named Lloyd spent his days sitting in a wheelchair staring into the air. He hadn't spoken since the stroke, had shown no interest in life around him, and needed help to be fed. I had noticed early on during Lucy's days at the home that she had taken a special interest in Lloyd. Lucy would walk around his chair 3 or 4 times before politely depositing her little black behind at his feet. It never seemed as though he noticed. I simply let Lucy do her thing. As the weeks went on, Lucy seemed to prolong her visits to Lloyd a little more each day. What started out to be a 10-minute nap at his feet, turned into 20, then 30. Finally, when the nurse let me know that she'd been almost 2 hours, I decided to check on them. Lucy was not on the floor, but in his lap. Lloyd was staring into the air, but one hand was slowly stroking Lucy's back. In the days that followed, Lloyd was more willing to feed himself. One day, I stopped by to say hello to Lloyd, and he simply closed his eyes. I set a grooming brush on his nightstand and, without a word, left his room. 2 days later, a nurse peeked into his room and saw him brushing Lucy's black curly fur. We were amazed, but even more so when Lloyd began brushing his own hair. Next, I tried to convince Lloyd to join an activity. I promised him Lucy would sit with him. I was answered with a bold, icy stare. This is better than nothing. One day, about 6 weeks after Lucy and Lloyd had become friends, Lucy suddenly stopped going into his room. Instead, she sat very quietly outside his door. By this time, the pair was the talk of the home, and staff and residents alike were bewildered at the dog's new behavior. But the next day, Lucy plopped herself at his door, and Lloyd wheeled his own wheelchair out to join her. She took her place on his lap, and he brushed her coat. He had never even attempted to move his wheelchair on his own before he met Lucy. His family was called and given a progress report. They came to visit, and he stared at them instead of the air, but still had no expression and said nothing. The doctor wasn't impressed, saying that this is as far as Lloyd's progress would ever go. Lucy had her own prognosis. Within a month, Lucy and her man friend could be found sitting in the recreation room together, a man and his dog. Lloyd still didn't talk, but now he made eye contact with others around him. For a year, Lucy and Lloyd continued to be close friends. He was her first visit of the day and her last in the evening. And of course, many other times throughout the day. Lloyd would brush Lucy and feed her tidbits, saved from lunch. On one hot summer day, I had scheduled an appointment immediately after work, one where a dog would not be welcomed. Instead of taking Lucy to work with me, I left her home where it was cool. I made my morning visits as usual. The conversations were mostly questions about where Lucy was. When I entered Lloyd's room and he had not seen Lucy, I was met with a scowl and a grunt. I was surprised, not at his anger, but that he had made a sound. It was something no one at the home had ever heard from him, ever. Later that day, I stood at the nurse's station and could feel his eyes piercing my back. I suddenly felt a hard object hit me squarely in the back of the head. I turned to find Lloyd directly in back of me and the dog brush on the floor. He had thrown it at me and with perfect aim. Where the heck is my dog Blackie? I almost jumped directly out of my shoes. Are you looking for Lucy? I asked. That's a stupid name. Where is my dog Blackie? The man who had rarely looked at anyone and had not spoken since before his stroke was talking. There was no speech therapist, no special medicine, no special doctors, only special attention from a little black dog. 6 months later, Lloyd was walking, talking, socializing, and finally going home. His family had arranged for a home care nurse to visit and take care of the needs he could not. The nursing home staff had taken care of another special need. As we gathered to wish him well, we gave him a large wiggly box decorated with a huge yellow bow. Lloyd opened the box and wide grin covered his face as a small black pup jumped out and barked a greeting. Lloyd scooped up the little dog immediately. After all, he couldn't go home without his best friend. Thank you so much for listening.